Good evening, Senators. I'd like to start off with 2134, the crimes reporting. We're totally in favor of that. Our brother organization took 2014 data, and it showed that 75% of the gun charges were dropped. Also, back in 2013, Representative Chippendale on the House side studied 2010 and 11, came up with 95 percentile. And the reason why I mention that is that, and as you know, Joey Limbeck did mention that, you know, cases are pleaded down, but how many times does the same criminal get that same charge? If he's caught with a gun once, gonna caught with a gun twice, then give him 5 years and let him sit there. Let him learn his lesson. You know, it's the criminals. We're always asking for the criminals to pay a stiffer penalty when it comes to firearms. You know, that's the way it should be. You know, earlier, it just seems that there's a reluctance as far as going the full distance on convicting somebody with a gun charge. So
Michael,
I just wanted to say that.
Let me just jump in for 1 second. My concern with that, and the reason I put that bill in, is so that we, as an elected body on the House and the Senate side, are able to have those statistics annually in real time. And I'm just surprised again that the Attorney General's office, Joey's not here, but that there'd be a reluctance to do that, cloaked in statement that there's duplicity. For the life of me, I don't get that.
Yes, sir,
Wouldn't you want to come before the General Assembly annually and brief the General Assembly so that we all could look at it collectively and discern what the right way to go is? There's no argument that refutes that. Duplicity is a red herring, and I'm really taken aback by that, respectfully. But anyways, please go on.
I'm in total agreement with you, Senator. So I'll move on to 2148, reciprocity bill. Senator Jacone, I believe there's a sub-A in it. I haven't seen it yet, but that particular bill does need some work as far as contracts with other states. Ms. Wyman earlier made a comment that having other states, you know, come in and carry that, you know, don't have our same standards. Well, if you look at Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, they have what they call permitless carry. So that means anybody who is legally can own a firearm can carry in those 3 states. So there hasn't been, it's been a few years now, it hasn't been an uprise in firearm issues with law-abiding citizens that are carrying, you know, without a permit. So that's you know, a lot of people have that issue, but a lot of states that are open carry and permitless carry don't have that issue. There is no statistics saying that there's a more issue with more people carrying firearms. Frank covered the bump stock, so 2274 shotgun. Last year, the Attorney General testified, Joey Limbeck, that it was put in for Omar Little. Now, Omar Little is from The Wire. The Wire was a TV show on HBO, and I know this because it was a great show, and I watched all 6 seasons. So, but I don't understand because why this bill is in. Because if I walk down the street with a shotgun slung over my shoulder, and the police confront me, I'm pretty sure 100% I'm going to get arrested. Because I believe that's open carry. Regardless if it's a rifle, you can't open carry a pistol unless you're, you know, a Brinks person that's carrying for his job on the outside with a uniform. So this to me just is, this bill, the shotgun bill, is more of entrapment for the law-abiding citizen. 2276, the minor bill, conflicts with Chapter 20, where 15-year-olds can hunt by themselves. The magazine ban, you know, we have, it covers manufacturing, so then we lose jobs in Rhode Island because we do have manufacturers that do magazine bans, plus the 2 studies after 2004, the assault weapons ban expired from 1994. I know the mayor was like 2004 to 2014, but he was off for by a few years, but that's okay. So, and it has, the study showed that it had no implications of crime going up or down because of the magazine ban. Moving permits to the AG authority, totally against for a couple of reasons. One, that means you have one authority in the state of Rhode Island. And if carry concealed permit holders will tell you back when Attorney General Whitehouse was in office, you went down to get your permit, the application was green. You take it home, you take a month, you fill everything out, you go back. Next month it's pink. Oh, you have the wrong application. This month it's pink. So he basically refused to issue any permits the whole tenure that he was in. And that's what happens when you have one licensing authority. And the reason why Joey Limbeck mentioned that, you know, the Attorney General does issue the most permits is because the towns don't want a shall issue. They're refusing. You have East Providence, where I think they're on their 5th case from the Supreme Court that you have to issue, and they're still not issuing. We have a girl that belongs to our gun club in East Providence. Her ex-boyfriend was very abusive, beating upon beating upon beatings. Everything was reported to the police department. She went for a permit because she has 3 children. Went up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said issue the permit. Of course, they come down and East Providence says, well, you know what? We're not going to give you a permit, but if you catch one more beating, then come back and talk to us, and then we'll think about issuing you a permit. I mean, it's a shall issue on the town side, and they don't want to follow the law. A lot of them do. There are towns that do issue, but the majority of them don't want to. And to me, it's to go under one authority is going to let one person make all the decisions. It's not going to go fair for the law-abiding citizen. And I feel that you could have a Massachusetts system, which the city and town issues the permit, but it goes to the Attorney General. They just look over the paperwork, make sure everything's okay, and then they send the ID down to the town. But it's the authority of the town that issues the permit. But the AG has everything collective in one system, so when you do get pulled over, they can tell every city and town if that person has a permit, because it's logged in there. So we should have one general system of a database, but we should have the town issuing and then the AG issuing, and that's the way it should be. As far as the national background checks, I don't understand why law-abiding citizens are the only ones that are selected to the side that they're going to have to pay for that. No one else that has to get a national background check has to pay for that. I don't agree with that. The red flag, wow. So the red flag, we have a domestic violence bill that passed last year. There's huge problems with it. There's constitutional problems with it. You give up ownership upon a restraining order. You know, the Supreme Court knows about it. The judges know about it. That has to be squared away. And now we're going to put the red flag in, which is like 9 times more on steroids, as far as I'm concerned. And the one thing that really bothers me about the red flag and the domestic violence that passed, and I am pro-law enforcement, but if a law enforcement officer is red flagged, there's a provision in there for him to still have his firearm when it comes to work. And I'm sorry, if the police officer should be able to go to work, sit at a desk, no firearm. Same thing with a domestic violence. If his right to own a firearm is taken from him, he should not be allowed to carry his firearm at work. Because again, if he's that unsafe or he's red flagged, then again, he should be under the same restrictions. So that's all I'll talk about the red flag part of that. I hope I'm moving quick enough for you, Madam Chair.
You're doing okay.
All right,
I'd
thank
let
you.
you know if you weren't.
All right. 2606 needs to have a better description of really what they want to accomplish on that. So, school grounds. There's a lot of misinformation. Ms. Wyman said that there was only 4 states in the country that allow carry concealed permits holders from K to 12, and that's not correct. There's actually 11. It's actually shifting in the opposite direction. Out of the 39 that are left over, they do allow carrying on universities and colleges. So, I hear a lot of different, talk about restricting law-abiding citizens would carry concealed permit holders from our friends on the left. But my issue, even with Mayor Lorza, who has a tough job because Providence is probably the highest criminal rate in the state, is that neither Providence or our people on the left that are anti-firearm are coming up with any solution. There's no talk of a solution. And my solution is this: for the last 6 years, we've been saying more security. Now, I work at Logan Airport. Every 2 years, I get badged. I go through customs check. On our doors for entry, there's a biometric keypad. I have to scan my badge. I have to put my fingerprint on it. I have to put a code in it. It allows me to go through the door. If I don't make it through the door in 5 seconds, the alarm goes off. I have to reset that door, and I have to call the state police and say it was accidental, and they'll look at the film and say, okay, you're all set, Michael, continue on. This type of system can be put in schools. Every door could have this and have one entry point of entry into the school. You could have one person monitoring that system. If the fire alarm goes off, the system will allow all the doors to open up so the children can get out. If you set that door off, that camera is going to tell you exactly who did it. So there's also bulletproof glass. The NRA did a study. In Texas, you couldn't be allowed to carry on school grounds. They changed that. They actually took the NRA's SHIELD program and it did the whole study of what schools need. They've done 162 districts where they've changed with bulletproof glass, training people that work in the schools, whether they're teachers or principals, making them marshals on their choice, not mandatory. And then they've also trained people that are into the marshal program. So they have law enforcement there also. So with a good lockdown system, you can accomplish the security that we need. Now, I understand funding. And you may laugh at this suggestion, but this is 2 suggestions I have. One is, for the next 2 years, I tried to figure out, there's 20, maybe 28 schools I allowed in each district, in each city and town. There could be more, there could be less. So around, say, 1,025 schools in the state of Rhode Island. And again, I'm not really accurate on this number, but I just want to throw this number that I could try and get something. So if each citizen in Rhode Island every year, say for a 4-year program, was taxed $250, that would raise $1 billion. It takes on an average, according to statistics I saw in Idaho, because they actually reinforce their schools, around 400,000. I put in 900,000 because of the biometric doors and the personnel to run everything. So that's 900,000 that we could spend on each school just by those 4 years. And I'll write a check now. Because to me, it's the best thing ever is to secure our schools instead of everybody thinks that the assault weapons ban is going to stop school shootings. And at the end of the day, whether it's an assault weapon that a person goes into school with or a 45, the parent is still grieving because that child is dead. They had a lady the other day tried to get into a school with an axe. If she had gone into school with an axe, either way, people are going to get harmed or dead. So let's fortify our schools. After 9/11, we fortified the airports. I lost my friend Renee Newell. They fortified the airports. Now it's very hard. You'll see a shooter like in LA get as far as the TSA part of it. They can't get through that because everything off of that is just public area. And so it's a great system. So I don't understand why September 11th and then, since Sandy Hook, we're still not fortifying our schools. We have 2 congressmen, 2 senators. I don't know why, especially with this president we have, why we're not looking for federal money to actually sit there and fortify our schools. They're putting in legislation for assault weapons ban. How about we put a bill in federally to protect our schools? Now, there's a gentleman, and my heart goes out to him. His name was Andrew Pollock. His daughter, Meadow Pollock, was killed in Florida at the last shooting. he was in the White House, and he stated, you know, my daughter, and now I visit her at the cemetery. And he did say, after 9/11, they straightened out the problem security-wise. Why 5 years later we still haven't done it for Sandy Hook, and why aren't the schools fortified? He also was on the Fox News yesterday because he walked the whole Senate floor in the Senate to get the bills passed to outlaw bump stocks, but also to fortify the schools and train teachers and principals and allow more resource officers and fortify the schools in Florida. And he said that he's going to work on the House side, he's going to walk the floor until they pass that bill also. He's a very courageous man, you know, that just lost his daughter and realizes, just like I've been saying for the last 6 years, that, hey, you know what? We need to fortify our schools. You know, I'll give you a personal example, personal tragedy. When I was 15 years old, I woke up in the morning. I went to school at Slater in Pawtucket, and on my way to school, I said, you know, my parents were divorced. I said, I'm going to call my father and see if he can spend time and hang out for the weekend. And, you know, off to school I went. Well, at 9 o'clock, I got pulled out of school. There was my mother, and she says, we have to go home. So I went home. There was a naval officer there because my father was active duty Navy at the time. And he was a Navy recruiter in Boston. It was his last day on the Thursday. They had a dinner for him. And him and a Marine would carport back and forth to Boston. And their car had broken down in the breakdown lane right at the 93-3 split. State trooper, this is 1979, so there's no cell phone. State trooper stopped by, see how they were doing. They said, okay, we need a tow truck. He says, all right, tow truck's on the way. I'll come back in a half hour and check on you. Tow truck driver is coming down 93. This guy passed the tow truck driver, he said, around 80 or 90 miles an hour. As he came over the hill to split, it was over. The guy was in the breakdown lane, killed my father and killed the Marine instantly. The state police said he was drunk, but at that time with the laws, they could not take him for a blood test. They could only take him to the hospital because he had injuries. They couldn't find out if he was legally drunk because the laws didn't provide that. Now, the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, they changed that. They didn't go after the firearm. They didn't go after the car. They went after the driver. So let's not go after the firearm. Let's go after the mentally ill. Let's go after fortifying our schools. It's logic. So I don't understand why 6 years later, again, we're not dealing with fortifying our schools. I know it's about money, but again, look, the suggestion I just showed you, I'll gladly take the tax for the next 4 years. I have no issue with taking that and spending the money to fortify our schools. The last thing on this bill I'll explain to you is the gun-free zone portion of it. There was this video on last year. This gentleman's running through the town, very anxious. You could tell his urgency. He runs into this building, finds his loved one dead on the ground. Puts up a sign outside, gun-free zone. It's almost like a Groundhog Day where it repeats the day. Chevy Chase woke up every day, or Bill Murray, and he repeats the day and he knows what's going to happen. Again, the next day, he's running towards the building. Again, his loved one's still deceased. He puts up a bigger sign, gun-free zone. And so on. It went on for, so my point to the story is a gun-free zone where you take, no one can have a firearm in the gun-free zone is not going to work. It just endangers more lives. So on the mental health aspect of it, I was kind of confused because, you know, the two police chiefs were here. And I remember back in 2013 that we passed the mental health task force bill. And that was, I don't know if everyone remembers, but Washington, D.C. Navy Yard, there was a mentally ill guy that was working there for a contractor, went and bought a firearm and went on and killed Navy personnel. Well, that individual was in Rhode Island before that, and he was working at the naval base in Rhode Island. And he was stopped from buying a firearm because of the mental issues he was having. So they, either local or state police did their job here and stopped him from buying a firearm, but they didn't put him in the NICS system. If they had put him in the NICS system, then the Washington D.C. shooting never would have happened. So mental health task force bill, and then in 2014, the bill was passed where someone is taken to the mental hospital against their will because they're worried about them hurting themselves. It goes into the NICS system. So I'm kind of confused at what the chief was saying. We have this in play. I don't understand why it's not being used. So that's just a question that I have, that I don't understand why that's not really being applied at all when it comes to mental health right now in Rhode Island. It should be. I believe that's the way the law is. All right. So, there's a lot of, my last thing on the carry conceal bill for schools, I hear about, school teachers and principals being trained. Country of Israel. Every teacher carries. And it's an AK-47 strapped over their back, whether they're out at recess or whatever. In 20 years since they've implemented that, they've had 2 school shootings in 20 years. So a well-trained person, it will work. It will protect plus fortifying our schools. So, all right, I'll move on. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
If you can continue
ma'am.
along, we
I'm almost
haven't
done.
scratched the surface yet.
Yes, ma'am, I understand. The assault weapons ban, I covered part of that, and that there's no finding of, after 2 studies were done, that the assault weapons ban will actually, it won't do anything as far as crime is concerned. You have other things that, you have drunk driving, you have drugs that kill more people, you have doctors that kill more people. There's so many other things that are way above firearm deaths. So, this last thing I'll state, and I'll be done, Madam Chair, is we must reject the idea that every time a law broken, society is guilty rather than the lawbreaker. It is time to restore the American precept that each individual is accountable for his actions. That's Ronald Reagan. So I am done. If I have any questions that you'd like me to answer,
Senator
I'd gladly
Matz.
answer.
Well, not a question. Mike, Mr. Neal, over the years, I appreciate you because even though we're on opposite sides many times, you always take time to listen. And you're very patient with it, and how you also let me know about your side. So I appreciate you. And I think for all of us, for me, is not to lose sight, because sometimes we really have the same objectives. The methods is what people that are fighting over. So the objective really for me is to protect kids and to protect rights. Now the methods, how we get there, we can dispute that at all times, but sometimes when things get emotional, people lose sight of what we're really trying to accomplish. And so I do appreciate your patience. And for me, the neighborhood that I come from, I still live in my grandfather's house on the south side. So in the summertime, I can hear off in the distance the guns going off. Richard Rose, he's an assistant prosecutor in the federal courts. He used to come. I was in charge of security at the high school where I worked as a vice principal. I was in charge of security. And we would have an assembly, and he would have, by decades, he would play the New Orleans funeral music, and all the names would come up of all the kids that had been killed by gun violence. And then he would ask, after several decades, couple of decades, he would say to the kids in the auditorium, "How many of you know a name that was on that list?" And almost every hand would go up of someone that was killed by gun violence. So I listen to you, but it gets. I try not to get emotional. But one thing I do try to pride myself in listening to both sides, and you do the same thing. And I just want to say that many times we're on the opposite side, but I appreciate you and your professionalism and how you handle things when you come up here to advocate for for your people. But again, for me, is I don't want to lose sight of the objective. The objective is to protect kids and to protect rights. The methods is what we'll fuss over. But prayerfully, prayerfully we'll get through that and we can accomplish the objectives that we all want. And so I appreciate you. That's what I wanted to say over there.
Thank you, Senator. That
Thank
means a lot to me.
you, Senator Metz.